I don't know about you, but when I have managed to flip an angry customer into somebody who is happy to give me money, I feel like I have had a very big win. Welcome to the Bringing Business to Retail podcast, where I, Selena Knight, share strategies, interview retail revolutionaries, and delve into the minds of e-commerce experts to help you grow a profitable, independent retail or e-commerce business. If you're stuck in a rut, or if you feel like business is way harder than it should be, or you've overachieved all of the things that you've set out to and are wondering what to do next, or how do I even make this better? I know that you're going to love today's episode. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. Over the weekend, I managed to do something that I'm a little bit proud of. If you've been following along for a while, you'll have known all about the trials and tribulations that I experienced during #CountryHouseRescue. For those who haven't been following along, basically what happened was during COVID at the end of last year, Ed and Lana and I moved to this little country house that we have, and we moved there for a few months to renovate it. The tenants had absolutely trashed it, and pretty much everything from the floors to the walls to the ceilings, every single door had to be replaced. It either needed to be fully rebuilt, repainted, replastered. Everything had to be redone inside and out. So for about 2.5, maybe 3 months, we were down there working on that property. Now, I am super happy to report that said Country House Rescue has came up a treat and sold. And last weekend, I had to go, or we, Ed and I, went down to the property to sell all of the items that we had used to stage the house. It's a little bit of a trip. It's about 4.5 hours each way. Now, in next week's episode, I want to tell you all about how I managed to double my revenue over that weekend in just 12 hours. I did a little Facebook Live inside of our Scale Your Store group, and I'm going to share it with you here on the podcast. But what happened during this garage sale, which went from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m., is at the beginning, we had very strict instructions that there was no holds, no prepayments, just turn up on the day. It would start at 8 a.m. Don't come before 8 a.m. And so quite a few people had messaged me saying they wanted specific items, and I stuck to it. I was like, look, first in, best dressed. You want it, be here at 8 o'clock. You know what happened, don't you? People turned up at 7 a.m. and I sent them away. Now, you might think that that was bad business, but I felt like we had enough interest in what we were selling that I didn't have to take people at 7 o'clock in the morning. And by the same token, those people who were respecting my wishes and coming at 8 a.m., why should they be penalized for doing the right thing? So I stood my ground, and at 8 a.m., the doors opened and a flood of people came rushing in. Now, the funny thing is, this is in a little tiny country town. I mean, the entire population of all the little villages together is about 12,000 people. So when you have a queue of people at your door, you know you've done something right when it comes to marketing your event. And I'll tell you all about that next week. But of course, we opened the doors, and one lady, she was first there. She was standing at the door. She came in and she said, I would like to buy the sofa, the dining table, the rug, basically the entire dining and living setting. She's like, I want all of it. It's like, fine. So we tallied it all up, and she transferred the money, and we went around and put sold stickers on everything while she was bringing the car around to load it all up. And another lady got really angry at me that I had sold the sofa before she came in the door. And I was like, well, first in, best dressed. She's, well, I wanted the dining table. Is that gone as well? And I said, yeah, it is. The same lady bought both of them. And she was getting really, really upset. But I was here, and I've lined up, and I've been waiting, and I told you that I wanted that, all those things. Now, I could have just left it there and said, too bad, so sad. But I didn't. I managed to turn the entire conversation around and find out what she needed, and was able to pretty much accommodate a list of things that she wanted to achieve. Now, it didn't include the sofa and the dining table, but I did have other options for her, and I went to the shed and grabbed a few things out that weren't already. The fact of the matter is, sometimes your angry customers can end up spending a ridiculous amount of money with you when they just feel like you are listening to what they have to say and you are solving a problem. This lady dropped quite a lot of money, and I don't know if she was the highest paying person on the day, but she was certainly up there. In fact, she came back 3 more times that same day and bought more items. Now, I don't know about you, but I always feel that deep sense of satisfaction when I've managed to turn someone who is extremely annoyed into somebody who is happy to give me money over and over again. Now, in today's episode with Nate Regier, he is going to walk you through his story and how you can do that, how you can turn an angry customer into a high-paying customer. Generally, they tend to be ones that go on to tell everyone about you. They become your boomerangs and your drum beaters. So if you want to turn that frown upside down for your customers, you're going to love today's episode. And just quickly, before we jump into this episode, if you know that you have way too much stock on your shelves, in your storeroom, in your warehouse, and you know that it has to go, you are tying up your much needed cash flow, make sure you jump on over to selenaknight.com/inventory-training and grab my exclusive training class on how to understand why that stock isn't moving in the first place, the formula to know when it has to go, and some great strategies on how you can move it out and boost your cash flow fast. Get it before it's gone over at selenaknight.com/inventory-training. Okay, let's jump into today's episode. Today, we are going to be talking about conflict and customer service and a whole bunch of other stuff. So welcome to the show, Nate.
It is great to be here, Selena. Happy to be with you and your audience.
You have a lot of things that you're an expert in.
Well, I need to shorten that because every time I hear that read, I get overwhelmed by whatever I'm supposed to know or do. And that's why I call myself a recovering psychologist.
I like that. Well, the positive conflict, I got a little bit tongue-tied on that one. So before we jump into what is the difference between positive conflict and negative conflict, tell us a little bit about what you do now that you're a recovering psychologist.
Well, yeah, I am in the leadership development field, and I specifically am very interested in interpersonal communication and conflict. As a psychologist, I learned a lot about how the brain works, how people relate to one another, the psychology of behavior in groups. And now, as the CEO of Next Element Consulting, we want to apply those skills to helping leaders and helping teams maximize those second-by-second interactions with each other so that they can be connecting, they can be relating to each other, resolving conflict well, and leveraging all that energy that comes with being diverse and being different from each other.
So we're not necessarily talking about behavior, is that correct? I'm really interested in what positive conflict versus negative conflict is. So let's jump into that because my brain is just trying to work out how you can have positive conflict.
That's a great question. And we are talking about behavior, and we're talking about the beliefs and attitudes that come behind it and the emotions that come behind behavior. So I grew up the son of missionary parents in Africa. So my whole growing up was around an ethos of peace and nonviolence and helping people and doing everything you can to help everybody be happy. And as I grew older and saw more and more significant conflict in the world, I really started struggling with how can we – it seems like the only way to keep the peace sometimes is just to avoid conflict. And is there a way to reconcile the two? And when we look as a professional development person now, I see a lot of models out there that talk about conflict this and conflict management, conflict mediation. And if you Google the word conflict, all the stuff that pops up along with it are words like management, mediation, reduction. That makes conflict out like it's the bad guy, like it's supposed to be gotten rid of. And I just don't buy that because in our experience, conflict is purely energy. All it is the gap between what I want and what am I experiencing at any given point in time. And so the real question becomes not is conflict good or bad, but how are we going to use that energy?
So how do you? I have so many questions already, and we're like 3 minutes in. The first one is, let's just take it away from conflict and where it's going for a moment. But growing up in Africa, did you struggle? And now that you focus on conflict, looking back, do you struggle with what you saw in the world then? Because I imagine being missionary parents, you were helping people in quite dire situations versus what you're teaching now. Have you taken your experiences from when you were a child in that situation and used it to further what you're learning and teaching nowadays?
I am, yeah. And I experienced everything from extreme poverty to incredible military violence in southern Africa during apartheid when Nelson Mandela was still in prison. And so how people deal with differences and disagreements has been something I've seen misused so much in my life. I also had fantastic role models though. My parents and a couple mentors that I had were great examples of engaging people that were different around disagreements in a way that preserved their dignity. So I think even today when I'm working with leaders that are dealing with difficult situations or customer service, I don't think the dynamics are that different. It's just that the stakes are higher.
And they were so much more extreme. That must
Yeah,
have, it must have, do you sometimes wonder if that was the catalyst for where you are now?
I don't wonder. I know, and I've received feedback from people that know me really well when they've read my book, and they say, Nate, this is your journey. You've told your story in this book, and I don't think I set out to do that. But at age 50, sharing kind of where I'm at in my life and my philosophy on things and the methods that our company has developed, I guess it is a culmination of all my experiences. So yeah, the seeds were planted and they've been nurtured a lot along the way.
Not that that's what we're here to talk about, but isn't it funny how those experiences, when you're having them, can seem so, I was going to say, I don't know the word for it, but so dire and so formulative that you could almost block them out because they're quite traumatic. But yet, all these years later, it put you on the path to doing what you do now and helping people with this unhealthy conflict versus healthy conflict, which is where we're going. So let's get back into that conversation. You said conflict is just energy, and energy moves. So how do you know whether it's unhealthy or healthy or positive, and how do you change it around so that it is positive?
Great question, and that is the question. And to answer that, we did a lot of research into the concept of drama. And there's a lot of great work that's been done in drama. And one of them is by a researcher called, by the name of Dr. Stephen Cartman. He developed a model called the drama triangle. And it outlines three roles that people play when we fall into behaviors that are unhealthy. And each of these roles, what they all share in common is that they're using the energy of this gap, this conflict energy, to feel justified about their own negative behavior. That's the only outcome. And so, for example, the persecutor role in the drama triangle believes I'm okay and you're not because you're lazy, you're stupid, you're uncommitted, you're late, whatever. And so their attitude allows them to mistreat people because they're okay and other people are not okay. The victim role, on the other hand, takes just the opposite view, and they assume, oh, I'm not okay and everybody else is okay, so that makes it okay for everyone to mistreat me, and I won't speak up or set boundaries or take care of myself. And then the third role is the rescuer, and they make a living off of helping everyone except themselves. And so they think that God appointed them the expert on everyone else's life and problems, and they thrive off of giving unsolicited advice and acting like they know what's best for everyone else. And so all three of these roles play off each other in drama, and all of them are simply misguided attempts to close the gap between what we're experiencing and what we want. And the reason it is such an energy vampire and so draining for companies and for relationships is that all of our mental energy is being spent trying to feel justified instead of trying to produce anything constructive. So the one statement, if people ask me, how do I know I'm in drama? Here's how you know. If you're looking for a reason to say, see,
I was
You're
right.
you're in you're in drama, yeah, and every single role wants to say it. The victim wants to say, "See, I knew nobody cared about me. See, I always lose." The persecutor wants to say, "See, you can't trust people. See, I knew you'd never amount to anything." And then the rescuer wants to say, "See how much you appreciate my help. See how smart I am. See how much you need me."
That's
That's
interesting.
drama.
But how do you turn this into a positive? Because I'm just really struggling with this concept because, like you said earlier on, the word conflict has always been associated with negative experiences and negative situations. So how can you turn this to be positive?
Well, what you said about negative associations is the first step because I'm just like you. And most people have had very negative associations with conflict because we've experienced people playing one of those drama roles in our life, and it never turns out well. So, why would we think drama or conflict is a good thing? And so, the first step is to reframe conflict as energy and realize that it has incredible potential to do something. And then the second thing is to defeat these myths that conflict is bad or that people get hurt. And the only way we can do that is to start is why we have gone back to the word compassion, because the word compassion is doesn't just mean my heart goes out to you, I care so much, I want to help you, I'm going to like your cause on Facebook and I'm going to send money to starving children in Africa. That's not compassion. Compassion comes from the Latin root that means co-suffer. Com means with, and passion means to suffer or to struggle. So compassion means to suffer or struggle with, whereas drama means to struggle against. And so now we really see what's going on here is the struggle. It's all about the struggle. The question is, are we going to do it against or are we going to do it with? So the first attitude shift is, do I want to struggle against this person to feel justified, or do I want to struggle with them to create something amazing?
So are you saying that you have to change your mentality to more of what I guess we've learnt to be like a win-win situation, and you almost have to give in, or you have to see it from their point of view and try and come to an agreement where you're both happy with the outcome. I'm
Well,
curious
it's
what you
not
do.
a yeah, and the outcome is not necessarily nobody has the outcome is not necessarily absence of conflict. So there's three key strategies, and they have to do with this model we call the compassion cycle. And we can't do this compassion thing without practicing three new skills. The first one is openness, the second one is resourcefulness, and the third one is persistence. So if we want to transform the way we do conflict, the first thing we have to do is get open. And open means being transparently courageous. It means being honest about your feelings, being honest about your motives. Because how many people in conflict immediately start to shut down, shut up, withhold information, don't tell the truth, and they don't reveal their motives because they feel like that would somehow open them up to getting hurt. And so it's very counterintuitive, but the very first thing to do is get open, get vulnerable, because that sends the message to the other person. Nobody's going to get hurt here, and my intentions are not to hurt you. Resourcefulness then is about creative problem solving, and only when we are open do we learn about what's really going on and what we really need and really want, so that when we get to resourcefulness, we can get creative about getting all the resources out on the table and working together towards a shared solution. Persistence then is critical because we have to figure out what are our boundaries, what are our non-negotiables, what is this really about at a level of kind of principles. And once we can talk about those things, we can see what it is we're really striving for and what we're trying to honor through our behavior. And so when we practice open, resourceful, persistent problem solving with people in conflict, we get the real stuff out on the table, we feel safe working with each other, and then we honor what matters most instead of all of the junk that we throw on the table in drama.
Okay, let's give us some examples. I think the easiest way to get retailers to think about how this would work in their business is to put it into, say, the customer service role. And I know that I read your story on your blog about your customer service issue that you had quite some time
Yeah.
ago. But if you can share it with us, just so we can relate, because when I read it, I was thinking, even your situation was a lot more stressful than mine. But even just recently, I went to the store, and I went to the store in America, and of course, you don't know where anything is because all the brands are different. And I remember asking, where was peanut butter or something like that. And she said it's in that aisle. I didn't even know I didn't even know what aisle I was in. I didn't know if the aisle was
Mm,
left or it was right. Was it on, when I got
mhm.
to the aisle, was it going to be at the top or at the bottom? And so I was actually more overwhelmed with her telling me that it was in an aisle. And it's like, now I have to figure out how to get there. So
Yeah,
how about you share
I
your
will.
story? And
I'll share that.
I was going to say, and just tell us where the conflict is in that and how you think that could maybe have been changed so that it was a much more peaceful outcome.
I will. I'll share the story, and it's a pretty significant situation. But after I share the story, I will draw parallels because we experience the same dynamics every day when we're trying to interact with as customers, trying to interact with people who have something for us. So the story begins. I was just married, and we were living near Seattle, Washington. My wife and I, Julie, and our first daughter had just been born. Her name was Lauren, and this was in. Um, we're all alone, just the two of us. Had a baby, scared to death, facing the world on our own, and our first child had an incredibly bad case of jaundice. So she was yellow coming out of the hospital, and of course we're terrified. We don't know what it means. And things were made worse by the doctor telling us that her bilirubin levels were significantly high and that if they continued to go up, she could face liver damage. So they sent us home with all of this equipment, and home health service came in. And they're called Billy lights, and they're these natural light that is supposed to reduce bilirubin level by putting light through the skin. So we had our poor little baby Lauren wrapped up in all of these blankets and lights on her, and she hated it, terribly uncomfortable. And we're taking turns watching her, making sure everything's working and making sure she's all wrapped up because every minute without the blankets, she could be becoming toxic. So one night late, I was on night shift with her, and I was laying underneath her cradle, rocking it, and I had fallen asleep. And I woke up and looked up, and it was dark. And I'm used to seeing a glow come out of the crib from these Billy lights, and so I kind of freaked out. And I looked and I checked things, and I couldn't get it to turn back on. And I checked the plug in, and I checked the switch, and they wouldn't come on. And I started to panic. I was thinking, oh no, every minute that goes by again, her liver could be damaged. I don't know what to do. So finally, I thought I'm just going to call the home health agency customer service. They gave me a card and 24/7. So I called them, and when the gentleman picked up the phone on the other end, I said, I don't know what to do. I'm freaking out. My daughter, I could hardly breathe. And I said, and the Billy lights won't work and blah, blah, blah. And when I stopped to take a breath, here's what I heard on the other end. He said, sir, is the machine plugged in?
Oh, don't we hate that
And,
question?
oh my gosh, I could have crawled through the phone line and strangled this person. And I harbored that resentment for 21 years before I wrote this blog that you read. And when I was writing the article, I finally realized I can't blame him. He's just doing what every good customer service person is supposed to do. He has a list of statistically the most common problems. What is the solution? And he's just working his list. He's just doing what anyone is supposed to do and try to help solve the problem. But here's the problem. He was not solving the real problem. The real problem was my emotional distress, and I was scared to death. The real problem wasn't the technical issues with the Billy lights. It was the gap that was caused between what I wanted and what I was experiencing. And so he made what I believe is the cardinal sin of customer service, which is you start at resourcefulness by trying to solve a problem without starting at openness and getting real about the emotions involved. And so I was very angry with him. I couldn't hear him. I thought he didn't want to help me. And so his ability to help me problem solve was greatly reduced. My ability to be a helpful person on the other end of the line was greatly reduced. And so that was significant for me, and I've used it as a principle for customer service that finally makes a lot more sense now in the context of open, resourceful, persistent in the compassion cycle.
So if he would have started with openness, what do you think he could have said? instead of is it plugged in?
Here's what I would have liked. If I was training him today, I would have trained him instead of working off a technical list. I would have trained him. First thing you do is recognize if the person's in drama, and I was playing the victim role because I don't know what to do. I'm freaking out. And the very first thing you do is start it open by empathizing, go to resourceful and offer to be a resource, go to persistent and make a commitment to the customer. And it would have sounded like this. Sir, I can't even imagine how scared you must be. I don't have any children, and so I can't relate, but you sound incredibly scared. I'd love to spend some time on the phone with you going through a checklist so we can figure out what's the problem. And I just want you to know I promise to stick with you until we have this solved. How does that sound?
Do you know that is so good. I tell you the thing that it's almost as bad as is it plugged in is these here in Australia it's especially offshore customer service centres where they say I hear that you're saying you're upset with your lights not working. It's like, okay, I get that that's a whole psychology thing and you've got a script. You're supposed to repeat back to me that you've understood my problem, but no, you don't hear me. You're just following the script.
Well, and it's so mechanical and it's so technical and it's so cognitive. There's nothing emotional about that.
No, it is literally
Yeah.
like somebody told them that they have to repeat this phrase and to say that they have understood your problem, but they really don't care. And here is something I have learned in my 20 something years of customer experience, customer service and customer experience is when someone is angry at you, 99.9% of the time, they are not angry at you. They are angry at some other thing in their life that happened. And the thing that you sold them that didn't work or didn't fit or something that you did that upset them was just the trigger for everything else happening in their lives.
Absolutely. And they're angry because there's a gap between what they want and what they're experiencing. And there's nothing wrong or irrational about that. Now, maybe what they expect is irrational, but the gap is real and the emotion is real. And if we don't acknowledge that, we can't make progress with them because they can't hear us. It's kind of like they don't care how much we know until they know how much we care. And so I had a great experience recently. I called my cable TV and internet company because I was having some problems with connectivity. And I called them and they picked up the phone. I said, "Hey, how can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I'm having problems with my internet and it keeps dropping my Skype calls. And I'm trying to have, these podcasts." And here's what he said. He says, "Sir, that's got to be so frustrating because you've got work to do and you need your internet to be working. Can I ask you a few questions and do some troubleshooting? And I promise I promise we'll get this resolved or we'll make it right before I hang up. How does that sound?"
That is so much
Ah,
better, isn't it? I was stunned when you said great experience and cable company because those two words do not go together in my situations.
well, he's fabulous. It's like he put myself in my shoes, which is one of the most important principles of customer service is put yourself in the customer's shoes and validate their emotion. You can validate their emotion without ever validating who's right or wrong. That's not the point. And good customer service people can distinguish between the two. And when you acknowledge someone's emotion, they calm down greatly because they know you're hearing them, and then they can struggle with you to solve the problem because you need their participation. You need them to be an active participant in the problem solving in order for it to go well.
Okay, can we do a couple of role plays?
Yes,
Okay, let's
it's my
pretend that
favorite thing.
you have a store and I've bought this t-shirt and it's too small. And your customer policy is that you don't refund because there's nothing wrong with it, but you're happy to exchange. Okay, so I walk in, I'm like, I bought this shirt for my daughter for Christmas and it doesn't fit. I want a refund.
Man, I can't imagine how frustrating it would be to prepare a gift for somebody and give it to them and then it's not what you wanted. I am so sorry. I would be willing to share I'd love to give you the options that are available to you. One thing I do have to let you know is our policy does not allow for refunds, but it does allow for exchanges. And I'm willing to do whatever else I can within those boundaries to make it right. How does that sound?
I want my money back.
I can tell how upset and angry you are, and I would be too, because I'd want to make things right. Is there anything else I should know about the situation? um, that would help us resolve it.
No, I just bought this shirt and she tried it on, it doesn't fit.
Here's now where, as a customer service person, I'm getting uncomfortable because I
Yep.
feel trapped, right?
Yep.
Because I'm in a situation where I'm not in charge of the policy and I can't make it right in the way you want to.
And
Very,
you're
very
this is
typical,
this
and
is where
I'm trapped.
this is
So
where
so
oftentimes they'll try and hand it off to a supervisor, right? Because
yeah,
the person at the other end, the customer, is not going to take no for an answer.
absolutely. So at this point, if I might say, this is where I have to be really, really self-aware. So I might say something like, um, I'm feeling anxious because I know I can't give you what you want. I'm not authorized to do that. Would you like me to connect you with somebody that you could talk to that might have more um, that might have more ability to work with you on that? Because I'm committed to staying with you until we get this resolved.
And at that point, the person's probably going to say yes because they're already at the point where they're saying, "Get me your manager."
Yeah, it's usually, and what's so interesting though is when people feel heard, they usually back off because in this situation, the person liked that shirt and they wanted that shirt for their daughter. So it's hard for me to believe that they really don't want the shirt. They want to feel better, and they have feel hurt, they feel harmed, and they want it to be made right. Now, very rarely do I see customer service people truly empathize with somebody. And when that happens, it's amazing how often the customer will really calm down and then tell you the truth and say something like, "Yeah, it really sucked, and you know, in reality, after I, you know, gave her the shirt, it didn't fit her, but it also wasn't a color that she liked, and so I really don't want this style anymore."
Yes. So
And now once they start telling you that stuff,
we go
now
to
the customer
resourceful.
service for go to resourceful and say, "Oh, okay. Well, how about we do this? I can exchange it, I know some shirts that are exactly what you're looking for. Can I show you some other styles and models that might be just what your daughter would like?"
And I think you probably could have gone there before you, now that we've had this conversation, you probably could have gone there before you tried to connect them with somebody higher up. If you did ask those questions, what was it? Was it just the size that didn't fit? Because maybe we could, and then I always say I like to ask three questions because anything more than three upsets people. So, did she like this color? Did she like this style? Did she like the sleeves on this? And if the answer is like yes, yes, and no, you can say, oh, well, how about I show you some shirts that sound like they might be a good fit, and let's see if we can
Mhm.
sort this problem out. And that, like you said, that's good customer service because that's when the resourcefulness comes in, and then your resistance. That's the point where you say, oh, I'll stay with you until we can sort this out.
Absolutely. Or maybe something like, besides it being too small, was there anything else wrong with it or anything else you'd change? And yeah, when people feel heard, it's amazing. They'll start telling you the truth. But when somebody comes in and says, "Shirt didn't fit, I want my money back," they have already decided that there is a behavior you need to do to make them feel better. And they've decided what the solution to their feeling is going to be. And so when we can interrupt the cycle and say, "We hear you, your feeling matters, and we want you to feel better too. And maybe we could work together to start finding a solution to get you to feel better." And then those questions, like you mentioned, are such fabulous questions at Resourceful to get through to that solution. Um, I had a situation funny when we sell online products, and then usually about a week after the person buys it, we send them a satisfaction survey, and we received a very rare dissatisfied customer on a product, and we were worried because most people love this product, and we're always call people when that happens. So I called this lady and I said, just following up, I saw that you didn't like it. She says, "Yeah, things didn't go well." And I said, "I'm so sorry." And she's like, it took 2 weeks to get here. And I said, "Man, when you order something that you're really excited about, you want it as soon as possible. And I'd be happy to look into what happened if you're interested." And she said, "No, I was just really excited to get it. And actually, I'm glad you called because I was wondering if you could come do training for us." Uh,
Okay.
And I'm going to Canada next week to train their whole leadership team.
All based on a negative review, negative
All
feedback.
all based on negative feedback, and all she wanted was to someone to say, "Man, I know how excited you were, and it stinks when you have to wait a long time for something that's really awesome."
I think that tip, that was something that we always did in our store as well, is when people leave a review, we made sure that they had to leave at least a first name. And you could usually go back through your orders and find the person who bought the thing. You know, it was a pink unicorn shirt and someone called
Yeah.
Jane bought it. And that was our job, was we would have to call that person and say, hey, we saw that you posted a negative review. We're happy to leave it there, but we don't want you to be unhappy. So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about
Yes.
what the problem was? And you know what? That thing about postage, especially here in Australia, is probably the number one complaint because it's something you don't have control over. You can't make the postal service deliver it in the time frame that they said they were going to deliver it. And that can be the situation that ruins it, just exactly like your negative feedback. And sometimes just picking up
Yeah.
the phone and saying exactly what you just said. Oh, I know how excited I get when I order something, and it's so frustrating when it takes forever to get there. You know, we don't have control over Australia Post, but we'll certainly make sure that we put a complaint in or submit a ticket to make sure that Australia Post are aware that this happened, because we know, especially my local post guy, he's not very good at delivering stuff. And so you have to put those tickets in. So I think when you explain that you're prepared to do something about it as much as you can to your abilities, like you said, they just kind of go, yeah, well, the actual thing is great. I just didn't like the fact it took 2 weeks to get here.
Well, and yeah, and I love what you identified. I think there's a lot of situations in customer service where there's something out of both parties' control that is maybe the problem. So instead of saying, "Hey, that's not my problem. I'm not in charge of post, so don't look at us. Don't complain to me about it." What if instead we partnered to co-struggle to work around this problem? So, what if as a vendor I said, "Man, I know, and sometimes it's really hard, and I know the post we can't control how fast things come. I'd be willing to share with you some strategies we have for working around that if you're interested." And then all of a sudden we're struggling together now to solve a common problem.
And even if they don't want to go to the effort of whatever solutions you have, in their mind, you've kind of fixed the problem, even though the problem's not fixed.
Yeah.
You've given them
Yeah.
some options and they've chosen not to take any action.
Absolutely. And that's where I think we have gone so overboard in these ridiculous beliefs like the customer is always right or do anything to please the customer. I think that's a big problem. I think we're putting ourselves in the position to be victim vendors for persecutor customers, and as if we just have to do everything to make them happy, and they don't have any responsibility for the success of the product or the success of the service. And I don't think that's a long-term healthy solution, nor does it build loyal customers. I think when we take those mistakes and those conflicts and we work with them and they're engaged and we're engaged in finding an awesome solution, it actually makes them more loyal because they're now advocates with us instead of just waiting for us to mess up or expecting us to fix everything or waiting for some vendor with a shinier horse and a wider night to come in and make bigger promises.
And to be honest, it's something I hear every single day. Those customers who say, "Well, I'm just going to, defame you all over social media and Google and all those kinds of things," because they can in this day and age. And it's
Mhm,
very hard for you to
mhm.
be on Yelp, on Google, on Facebook, trying to reply back to this person when sometimes you could, like you said, my my answer quite often is just pick up the damn phone, because everyone hides behind keyboards. But
They
picking up the
do.
phone and having a conversation with somebody doesn't happen an awful lot. And like you said, if you go into it with this knowledge that you've shared with us, it's really likely that you can diffuse the situation.
It is. And ultimately, we cannot control anybody else. We can only manage ourselves. We can only invite people into a healthy place and encourage them to work with us. But we can't, at some point, we do have to let go of that and not personalize it. And I wonder how many of these problems actually were brewing long before. And there was just a series of little things where people didn't feel heard, and then something clicks and they decide to take it out on us.
Like I said earlier, I reckon 99% of people who demand refunds or absolutely complain in customer service, it is not about your product. And I used to say things like that. I feel like I had a little bit of it. Maybe I had a little bit of your wisdom at some point, but maybe it's just 25 years of customer experience. But I used to say things like, it sounds like your day is not going the way you wanted it to when you first woke up. Just things like that. And they go, yeah, so someone ran into my car and then I was late to work and then and all of a sudden you can see that they just want someone to listen to them. It's not about the shirt.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's not. And we call that the difference between process and content. When people are distressed, they often focus on the content when it's not about that at all. It's about the process of how they're feeling, about how their relationships are going, about whatever. And it just so happens that the shirt that was too small, or the computer that arrived that's too slow, or the package that arrived late becomes the target.
Yes. It's just the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Do you talk about this in your book?
I don't talk specifically about customer service, but I have hundreds of examples of relationships and when things don't go well, and they're all very applicable. And there's an even balance between personal and professional applications.
And what's the name of the book?
The book is called Conflict Without Casualties, a field guide for leading with compassionate accountability.
Okay, we'll definitely pop a link to that, because I think, especially in customer service, if you've got examples in your book, even if they aren't customer service relevant, and people can see, how things could have been different or the outcomes could have been changed, I think that is must-have reading for every retailer, probably every business owner actually, but dealing with conflict and trying to diffuse the situation and just understanding those three parts that you were talking about, the openness, the resourcefulness, and the resistance, and knowing those three different roles that people play, the persecutor, the victim, and the rescuer. I think that will bring people around and make them make better decisions when they're in those drama moments.
It will. And the book has so many examples of our own experience in a role of a service provider and experiences we've had with customers and how we've negotiated that conflict. So I guess you could say, yeah, there are lots of customer service examples in there.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
I think we're going to leave it there so that people can process. I don't want to overwhelm everybody with processing that example with the refund and how they could do things differently and even manage their teams differently when these sort of situations arise. So if people would like to read, I know you've got quite a lot of information on your website. If people would like to read more or even grab the book, where can we find you?
We are at next-element.com, and everything is available there. You can look me up on LinkedIn or follow Twitter me at NextNate, or look up Next Element on Facebook. But if you look up Next Element Consulting, it will come up right up there on Google.
Fantastic. We'll make sure we put the links to those in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for giving us some great information. Your story is definitely something I think that needs to be shared, because that journey from Africa and the situation with your daughter to what you do now, that to me was, that situation in Africa was the whole catalyst for how you manage to help people in your life right now.
It really is. Thank you. It's been a pleasure being on here, and I can tell you're doing great work, and more customer service people in this industry need to hear this.
Thank you. You have a fantastic day.
All right. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. You can find all of the show notes over at selinaknight.com. If you found something that you heard today particularly useful, I'd love it if you could leave me a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And of course, feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit by listening to it. Want more retail biz strategies? You can watch the Bringing Business to Retail TV show, where each week I'll answer a question or provide you with a simple, actionable retail biz strategy that you can implement in your business right away. If you have a question or a guest, I'd love to hear from you. Drop my team an email at podcast@selinaknight.com, and I'll see you on the next episode. Have a great week.